So it's great to be here. I want to start by thanking Veronique for inviting me back. It's good to be back. But I have to tell you something. When I watched your talk this morning, you got me a little worried. She said, you know, it's very hard to get adoption of new things, new ideas like design thinking. And you talked about the stages of adoption. It starts with denial, right? And then I think you went to skepticism. And when she got to skepticism, she said, you know, well, like people in France, they say, oh, well, that's just for the Americans. Right? And then it got even worse because she said, or, you know, those crazy people from California. Yeah. So, but I heard and I know the great work you're doing here, and you're making progress and you're getting through that, and so that Eureka moment has happened for a lot of people in France because of you. So thank you for that. So we've heard a lot so far about design thinking. We've heard a lot about the people and empathy and process, and we've heard a little bit about space. And that's Steelcase's expertise. That's what I've been focusing on now for about 8 years. And so I want to add that third leg of the stool to this idea of design thinking. Christian mentioned that I spent about 17 years at IDEO, and what you may not know is Steelcase actually made a major investment in IDEO back mid-90s. I had started there in '88, and it was about, I think it was about 95, that Jim Hackett, our CEO, had been exposed to IDEO in the process, and so he decided that Steelcase should really have deep expertise in design thinking. And I don't think we even called it that back then. So we made a major investment, and so we started to work with IDEO in a closer mode. And we had already been working with IDEO for about 10 years. So fast forward to today, that's almost 30 years ago, 1987, I believe, Steelcase started working with IDEO. So if anybody ought to know about design thinking, wouldn't it be Steelcase? And having been at IDEO for so long, and Steelcase was a client of mine, and now coming in on the other side, I've learned both from the outside and the inside how hard it is to embed a new process in especially a big company. We're a $3 billion company, because there's a lot of antibodies. You know, there's a lot of pushback. There's a lot of norms that have been established for years. Steelcase is 104 years old. So I think I have a healthy appreciation for the challenges here. Now, as far as Steelcase goes, one of our, what I'd say when people ask me what our core competence is, I would say it's really trying to understand what happens in three-dimensional environments, physical environments. You know, what kinds of activities and behaviors are happening? How are those changing? You know, the behaviors and activities. And then how do we design spaces and furniture and technology, intentionally for those new behaviors, those new activities? And I'm certainly seeing on the education side tremendous change, tremendous pressure on education to change, to improve student learning, to prepare students for jobs, as they say, that don't even exist. But that's what we focus on. So we're very design thinking centric. I specifically focus on trying to help education institutions improve the teaching and learning through the lens of the space. How do you leverage the space to do that? Okay, so the great thing here, and it's sort of funny in a way, so the challenge that I've put to myself for this talk and this workshop, this session, is how might we, right? Isn't that what we start with in design thinking? How might we design work and learning spaces to support design thinking and creativity and innovation? There's a certain simple beauty in that question, but that's the question at hand. Okay, so I'm going to talk about three frameworks. I could call these realms, if not frameworks, that are really important in our experience and based on our research, both primary and secondary research, to support developing solutions that support innovation, creativity, and design thinking in physical environments. So the first one is obviously design thinking. If we're going to design spaces for design thinking, we need to understand what that process is. And then the spaces need to support the steps in that process. So how does the space support empathy? How does the space support the need to define the problem that you learn, the insights for when you do your observational research? How do you ideate? How do you prototype? How do you test? How does the space support those behaviors? So that's the first one. The second one, which is, I would say, is not independent, it's more of a parallel idea, which is how does the space support creativity? One of the things that we've done recently is we did a meta-study on student success. We talk about creating active learning environments that lead to engaged students that therefore leads to student success. So we decided, well, we need to know more about student success. How is it defined? Depending on who the stakeholder is, whether it's the student, whether it's the parent, whether it's government, whether it's the institution. And there's a lot of different definitions, and they overlap a bit. But we came to this framework based on the idea that if we're going to improve student success in the institution, then we need to certainly be aware of gaining knowledge, more the academic piece. We need to be aware of acquiring skills. We hear a lot about the 21st century skills that are needed by businesses of students that are graduating. But at the same time, a lot of businesses are saying students aren't coming out prepared with those skills. And one of those skills, there's communication is usually number one, collaboration, creative, critical thinking skills, and then creativity. It's always in the top 5. So how do we create environments to support the building of and the acquiring of creativity and creativity skills, whether it's in a business or in the institution? So we need to think about that. And then the last one, we just completed about a 1.5 year long study, global study on worker engagement. And we all know that if we have engaged workers, that they're probably going to be more productive, they're going to be happier, right? So we did this study globally. There were 12,000 employees in the survey, 17 countries, and consistently what came out of the survey, I think the overall aggregated data said that about 13% of the people that we polled, and this was done with Ipsos, by the way, independently, 13% were highly engaged. 13%. On the other end, 11% were highly disengaged, and then there was a lot in between. So a large percentage of workers today around the globe are disengaged. Okay, there's a huge cost to that. So out of that, and there's a lot that came out of that, but one of the key things came out of that is that we learned, and this actually, I think Ewan mentioned this, we learned that employees that have choice and control of where and how they work, at work or outside of work, are more engaged. They're more motivated. They're happier. So I think this is something to think about in business, is can we leverage design thinking in some way to support better engagement. And this has a direct impact on the physical spaces. So this idea of creating an ecosystem of choice and control to support a palette of posture, here's the framework, presence, and privacy is really important, okay? So I thought I'd ask, what is design thinking? I mean, we've heard that question a bunch of times, but is it a problem-solving methodology? Raise your hands. Come on, I can wait. Okay, it is, sure it is, certainly it is. It's not just a problem-solving methodology. Is it an innovation methodology? Okay, more hands. Okay. You know, in my experience, and Randy said, you know, you need to be design thinking. And I'd say I'm old enough and I've been doing it long enough that I can't not be design thinking. So from my personal experience, I believe that first and foremost, design thinking is a highly effective problem finding methodology. Right? The solutions, you know, the problem solving comes after you have the problem to solve. David Kelly talks about innovation is really finding good problems to solve, problems that matter to your users and your clients. So let's take each of these three sections. How might we design spaces for design thinking? So, you know, the first piece, how do you create spaces that support empathy? And actually, this one's interesting because the first thing I say is get out of the office. You know, you create empathy with users by getting out of the office into their world and understanding really, you know, what did we say? Not just in the shoes, but in the skin. Okay, you got to get in the skin, get, as we say, under the skin, and really understand that. Now, where the space comes into play is, you know, once you have all those photos and those videos and those interviews and those comments, now you need to come back and bring those and create an immersive experience with those assets that gets the whole team immersed in what was learned, because not everybody on the team has gone to every interview. They don't have all the information. So I think the space comes into play through creating immersive experiences of those insights and that empathy that tells the user stories. So that's one. Define. So in my experience, the most difficult part of design thinking is the synthesis piece. I mean, we can all go out and do observations and, you know, learn a lot, but then what do you do? The messiest, foggiest part of the process is then synthesizing those observations, identifying patterns, looking for frameworks, and then defining the opportunity or the problem in a very concise way so that the team knows, you know, what's the North Star? What do we focus on? So you need spaces that support that process. Ideating, brainstorming. How many Post-its and whiteboards did we see in the last, you know, few hours? You know, a lot. And so, you know, we need to support the ability to capture ideas both from individuals and groups. And then we're going to build the source material, as the D.school at Stanford says, for prototyping, which is the next step. And you need to make this ideation visible. Prototyping. You know, this is where we make ideas tangible, and I think this was mentioned earlier as well. You know, there was a guy at IDEO that I worked with that said, never go to a meeting without a prototype. I don't know if you met him, Denny Boyle. Anyway, he's been there, you know, forever. And it really works because prototypes are tangible. You know, it's not just words on paper. That's important too. But they really help you get a better understanding of, you know, what you're trying to accomplish. And whatever the media is. I mean, a prototype could be software. A prototype could be, you know, words on paper. A prototype could be a thing. And then the other thing is, there's so much talk. You talked about, you know, the buzz of design thinking, the buzz of making. I mean, come on. Making is a buzzword right now. And the fact is, I mean, I say, you know, actually I'm an engineer by training, so I've been designing and building things forever. I've been doing, I'd like to think, design thinking for, you know, decades. Well, but now it's in history classes, it's in English classes, it's in language classes, it's, you know, it's everywhere. And I think it just wasn't widely distributed before. So you need to match the sophistication of your modeling and your making to what you're trying to learn from those models, okay? And the space needs to support that. And then test. I mean, testing happens, you go back to the users to test, right? And you want to get feedback from those. And as you get feedback and you modify those designs, and you iterate those designs, then you take them back to the users and you continue to build your empathy for what their needs are, and you keep refining. So that's the first bucket of, you know, how might we design spaces to support design thinking? So here's some images. These are actually photographs we took in libraries around North America. Isn't it interesting that there aren't many books in the library book racks? We see that everywhere. It's an opportunity. So these are the pictures that we take, and then, and you've seen this again, Ewan showed a lot of these. Now you bring those pictures back, you make it visible, you create this immersive experience, and now the whole team can really get involved. Okay? Defining, this is a picture from the Stanford D.school. Again, lots of Post-its, lots of whiteboards. I was out at Stanford for a conference, and it was Bill Burnett, who is one of the leaders out there, and I was at an architecture conference, and everywhere we saw this. We saw whiteboards and Post-its, and I said, Bill, I asked him a question. I said, here we are in the middle of Silicon Valley. You can have any technology you want. You're creating all this technology. Why are you using so many Post-its and whiteboards? And he said, actually, he kind of sat back in his chair, and he said, that's a good question. I think it's because nobody's created a good digital user interface to that. For all the students here, that's an opportunity. I think that's a business opportunity. So initially, it's very messy. I mean, this is a picture of just rough stuff, right? Getting thoughts out, and then we start to refine that. And so, in our case, we summarize the insights or the observations into key insights with images that support that insight. And I actually can't read it from here. This was a project we did. I'll show you a picture of it. But you see that picture of the people up front? We noticed in libraries that students really like to study in relaxed postures, not just sitting at a table or chair. And so I'll show you something on that. So this is about continuing to refine the insights. Prototyping. So is it all about 3D printers? I mean, actually, 3D printers have been around since, I believe, the early 80s. It took decades to take off. This is a 3D printing studio in the middle of the library at Northeastern University in Boston. In the middle of the library. I'd never seen that before. But that's just one way to do it, right? I remember I said, match the sophistication of the model to what you're trying to learn from the model. This is a chair we did with IDEO, by the way. Great collaboration. Well, the first models that they built were just trying to figure out how the base would attach to the seat for this new type of chair. Well, those were made with paper and glue, and you can do those in you can do that in your office, right? Well, that's not very sophisticated, but it was very effective. Now you start to build models to try to get a sense of comfort of the chair. Now it gets more sophisticated. Now you're moving into the machine shop, and then as you get down the end, you might need a full machine shop to do something like this and produce that on a CAD system. So again, I mean, prototyping is extremely important, and you need the kinds of spaces to support all of those different modes. And then testing. This is testing we did of a new chair concept for libraries, which I talked about earlier briefly, and you need the space for that. And depending on the type of model you're building, your spaces need to support that. And of course, we do testing not only at our facilities, but out in the world. We take prototypes out and test them early. Okay, so the next bucket was how might we design spaces to support creativity? And there were three buckets that I mentioned: think, make, and share. And I think the point of this framework is there's so much focus on making that we don't want to forget the flow of the process of creativity and design thinking. And so we have to think about what we're going to make before we make it, right? And we need spaces to support thinking. So for individual and group thinking, for brainstorming and reflection, analog and digital tools. You've heard these before, but again, designing in advance of making. The making, we talked about spaces that support a range of modeling and prototyping, experimentation and iteration. And then sharing, once you think about what you're going to design, you design it, you prototype it, you make it, now you have to share it with people to get buy-in, whether it's the CEO, Michelle, or the team. So spaces that allow for both analog and digital presentation, discussion, critique, debate are important as well. And again, you see some of the same things. Again, this is Stanford D.school. Lots of Post-its and whiteboards. This is in our new Design and Innovation Center, Learning and Innovation Center, which I'll share with you in more detail in a bit. Making, this is at a high school in Michigan. One of the things we've learned about maker spaces is we have a lot of maker spaces at Steelcase, and we put them often at counter height, because people are moving around. They're building, they're going to grab supplies, they're coming back and things like that. That's one reason. Another reason is, especially in the learning environment, when the teacher and the student are at the same level, it's more democratic. It's less oppressive or maybe stressful for the student. We see a lot of students in schools hacking and making their own furniture. Okay, this is actually at a West Michigan Center for Arts and Technology in Michigan. But again, sharing tools, making tools with juxtapositions between the two. I show this because a lot of sharing is analog, but we've created solutions for digital sharing. One of the things we learned from our research is that just sharing digital content efficiently is really tough with teams. How often have you been in a meeting and Veronique, you're going to show your stuff, and then somebody else wants to show theirs, and you got to hand them the VGA cable and whatnot. This takes that problem away. It breaks down the transition time between sharing between different people. Last bucket. So how might we design spaces for engagement? And if you remember the three buckets I mentioned: posture, presence, and privacy. So for posture, if we offer options to work in standing, sitting, and lounge postures, and the employees or the students can choose those, we know that makes them happier. Presence. We need to enable quality interactions with teams that are local or distributed, remote, across continents, time zones, supporting both digital and analog communication again. And then privacy, and this is really growing in certainly, I think it's a global issue, but there's been such a focus on the open plan environment in businesses for so long. There's a backlash against that because employees are saying, I don't have enough privacy. I can't think. If I really want to focus on something, I have to go home or I have to go to a coffee shop. So how do we support focus and then the ability to rejuvenate by providing places that offer various means to do that? Okay, both open and closed spaces. So posture. This is a business school in Kansas City, Missouri. Of a wide range. I mean, we didn't do the beanbags, but the school matched the beanbag colors to our chairs. This is a professional development center in Guatemala at a private college, and you notice the range of different furniture in the middle. And oh, by the way, this is a professional development center, so all of the classrooms that are new that they're trying to teach the teachers how to teach in are around the center area. Okay. This is a brand new school in the San Francisco Bay Area, and it's a very flexible classroom. And if you notice, the tables at the back of the room are standing height, so the students in the back of the room can see over the students in the front. So you kind of get a tiered room on a flat floor. Presence. I think we have, Catherine, I don't know how many we have now, probably 300 telepresence nodes around the world. Telepresence, we're a global company. Video conferencing telepresence has become just a standard way we work. And so on the left, you see a closed office for a conversation. On the right, that's what we call a kiosk that allows a person, an individual or two people to have a more sort of ergonomic and appropriate telepresence. This is an interesting story. This gives you both the ability to have local and remote presence. This is a 132-person flat floor classroom at Virginia Commonwealth University, med school, brand new. And there are 2 floors of this. One teacher can teach from either floor and control all of the technology in both rooms And with teaching assistants floating around, those teaching assistants can either, they can have one student at one chair at one table pull up all their content if they want to show it to the whole class, or they can bring in remote participants, teachers or students from across the globe. So both local and remote. This is our learning center in Grand Rapids. So we have, these are just outside our classrooms. So we have spaces for privacy, where you can close the door, or open areas for collaboration. So adjacencies, we talk a lot about adjacencies, the spaces adjacent between, I'm running out of time, between learning spaces and front porches. So this is a solution we created for libraries to give students the ability to focus in the open plan. And this shows it in plan view. This is in a library. So I'm almost done. So do we walk the talk? What about our own spaces? we try to. So this is the new Steelcase Learning and Innovation Center. It's about 3 years old. It's an old food distribution warehouse that we've just completely rethought. We did design thinking on ourselves to understand the kind of space we needed to have. So this is kind of hard to see, but the point here is we have different types of spaces depending on the type of activities and behaviors. It's a palette of posture, a palette of presence, and a palette of privacy. So project studios, this is where a lot of design thinking happens. And again, you notice we've got seated height and standing height tables. Just outside those project studios, we have front porches. The front porches support team members coming out of the room if they need to come out and have a small conversation maybe between a couple of people. So they can do it right there. And the screen on the wall there shows the status of the project. So it's persistent. A strategy room, which is owned by the design teams, and the design team and the marketing team each have one of these. And I could go on in detail about why this works. But you notice we cut the table in the middle, and that's so you don't have to walk all the way around to get to the other side. Labs, where these are owned spaces. The last two are owned spaces, and many of these spaces are shared spaces. This is the technical and professional hub where we have designers and engineers when they're doing individual focused work, and these are owned workstations. And next to those workstations are the collaboration spaces and tools. This is looking back in the background into the technical professional hub, and then in the foreground is the neighborhood cafe. So this is a place for collaboration, trust building, relaxation, respite to happen, and it's right in the middle of the center. This innovation center, you notice the 3 screens on the wall. It's dual telepresence screens. I'm in this room multiple times a week having conversations with Asia and with Europe, sharing project information. Making happens in those project studios I mentioned, and that's usually low resolution, simple things. But then we have an exploration shop, which has model makers and engineers and designers who are certified can use these as well. And then we have a very, very large, extensive, high-performance machine shop. So again, that addresses that idea that making is different depending on what you're trying to learn. So, to conclude, last slide, design principles for design thinking spaces, provide settings and tools to create immersive experiences to build empathy within the team. Leverage all vertical surfaces and simple analog tools to support synthesis and ideation. Foam core and whiteboards and Post-its aren't going away anytime soon, I believe. Provide a range of prototyping spaces and tools commensurate with the sophistication of the models you're building. Provide spaces for real-time user testing and feedback. Support the flow of creativity with settings that enable think, make, and share. And finally, provide an ecosystem of spaces that support a palette of postures, presence, and privacy. Thank you.